Ward for Success Express, your business, career, and financial radio magazine. Hosted by Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazines.com.
San Diego employment attorney Ward-Heinrichs is back on Big Blend Radio Success Express show today to talk about employee theft.
Uh-oh.
I know, especially in the tourism and hospitality industries, which include shops, bars, and restaurants, attractions, lodging establishments. It pretty much is a thing that happens, and it can really be detrimental to a business. Ward is a regular Big Blend Radio guest and contributor to Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, as well as Parks and Travel magazine, which his article is featured on employee theft in the August and September issue. You can also go to nationalparktraveling.com and just type in Ward, and you'll be able to read the article. But the best thing is to go to Ward's website, especially if you're in San Diego. bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. He's got a blog on the site, and also he's on Twitter and Facebook, so you can keep up with him. He's always posting good, informative pieces for San Diego employees and employers. So, Ward, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm really glad to be back because there are some things happening in the workplace that we need to talk about.
I know. Theft is not good, and you gave us a really good list of what employers should be aware of, and you actually answered something for Nancy again.
Good.
I know. She just finally was like, that's how
she did it.
That's how she stole my money. Okay, so yeah. It's true. But when you put this article together, I'm like, we think about, maybe an employee taking a sandwich home. They shouldn't if they work in a restaurant, which I've watched, when we first got back to this country, I worked in 2 restaurants, and I watched the manager go into the walk room, the freezer thing, and just go home with a big piece of ham, or just like go home with, I'm going to take this brick of cheese home. And then the manager's little best friend started doing the same thing. But on the other restaurant that I was working with, man, if you even thought of messing, she had strict inventory rules, and you had to do inventory every time you closed and opened. And there were different people closing and opening so that people could be kind of double checked. So I thought a lot about that. But when I saw your list, there's all kinds of ways for people to steal.
Yep.
In business. I mean,
yeah, there really are, and the real reason for it is that employees do have access to merchandise, cash, and other valuables that the general public doesn't have access to. And so, like I said in the article, it's really an inside job. If employees start taking things from the employer, that's an inside job. They have better access, and that's why employers, they feel like there's a problem, well, even if you don't, you really ought to think about it and set up some systems that'll help protect you.
And so sometimes they're actually just taking pure cash.
Yeah, that certainly can happen. If it depends on the business, but most businesses still have cash registers. Certainly restaurants do, and other retailers. So if you have the cash register there, the cash is there, you really need to keep track of that and make sure the books are closed properly. When I go to Costco, I see register changes all the time where a new cashier will come on duty either for a break or whatever, or maybe a new shift. And they count it out. They're pretty careful. And then I see a manager come over and look at it. I don't know if they really count it or not, but they look at it and see if everything looks good. And then all 3 sign off on it. And so that's a pretty good system to make sure that money's not leaving the drawer.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I would think it would be difficult because things are so electronic, I mean, you have to be pretty quick, I think, thinking-wise, in order to get past these systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
yeah, I think you're right on that. The more sophisticated registers nowadays are hard cheats. I know that at least back in the day, and I'm pretty sure that it's still going on to some degree. There was possible on some registers to overring and not record it. I don't know if they struck it or if it was one of those that just didn't save the information, and charge the customer more, pocket the difference now, so that the items going out, it's getting charged the proper. I mean, the business is getting the right amount that they're charging for it, but the excess goes into the pocket of the employee.
Wow.
And that I know it used to be more common. I think you're right with the new machines. I think that's a lot tougher.
Yeah. Well, you said in your article, in bars and restaurants, that a bartender can bring in liquor from home and use that and get. I mean, I was like, dude, I actually have witnessed a bartender in a bar restaurant, and I was sitting and doing marketing stuff. That's what we do with the owner, and the bartender walked by her and had like a big thing of water that he was carrying in, like water bottles. Like if you like Costco, you go in and here's your 24-pack of water kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she's like, stop right there. What do you think you're doing? He goes, oh, this is just the water I prefer. And she's like, you'll take it out to your car right now. Like, that's it. You'd never bring any other product into my restaurant. Like, boom. Because she was like, no, he'll sell it. He'll start selling it to people,
Right.
Here's your bottle of water.
Same kind of thing.
Leave. And I was like,
Wow.
really? For water? And she's like, oh, yeah. She said, some of the stories she's told us is like, it's mind blowing, man. We should do a whole show on this, like with different restaurant and hoteliers and shopkeepers coming on the show to tell what has happened. But they, and I think it's, especially when someone's been there longer, then they know people's habits. They know when, the boss goes and takes an extra break or whatever. People start to know. And whenever we've witnessed any kind of thievery or underhandedness in a company, the first thing Nancy and I always go is like, it's going to be your most trusted person. And they're like, no.
No, yeah.
Pretty much 90% of the time, it will come out to be the most trusted person that's stealing.
Yeah.
And it's just because they know everything better. You know what I mean? That they're closer and not watched as much. Have you found that in cases that a lot of times it's the person everybody thinks is, Miss or Mr. Goody Two Shoes?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't run into that too often. It does happen, but it depends on how careful the owner is, I guess. The owner does tend to rely on certain employees more than others, but the owner really can't get too comfortable because people are people and you have to still spot check. So if they're not willing to do that, yeah. If they are, I know people have had their key employees for years, and I've not heard of a problem from those businesses. So I'm assuming there aren't any, but that doesn't mean I'm right. Maybe they just haven't caught them.
So what happens when someone really does steal, and and it is commonplace? When do you get called for that? I mean, are there different levels of, now this is like a serious crime, so that goes to a crime attorney, or that you end up working on a case with a crime, attorney, or what happens with that?
Yeah, I really never have. The way I get involved is someone will call me and say, hey, I think there's a theft or there is a theft. What do I do about it? I say, well, you have every right to terminate them, and then we talk about the best way to terminate them. So that's more what I would do. What I see is my clients, if there is a theft and they want to report it as a crime, they go directly to the DA or the city attorney, and yeah. They usually do that on their own. There's, unless they're just too busy, there's no reason to have me really involved. They can, get someone else or themselves to just call it in. Because I'm going to charge them a little bit more than their office manager will. So.
Well, it depends on the level. I mean, right now I'm reading. Oh my gosh, Ward, you should come on this show. I'm reading a book about the guy who does corporate spying, right? And he
interesting.
He invented devices, and he was involved in Watergate, and so it was political. So yeah, he was a Republican, and then he ruined his career because he got caught. His political career, he would go and hire prostitutes to dance outside Democratic Democrats' houses and stuff like that, and then the Democrats would get in trouble for having strippers and stuff outside their house. things like that. Dude, I'm serious. This is so cool. I mean, cool reading. I don't know how cool it is, but it's kind of interesting about the times we are in today.
Wow.
It's interesting, but because I was thinking corporate spying, like, wow, we're talking about theft, and now I'm like, there's spying. Oh, this gets interesting. But when it's something big, I mean, if someone's like taking like hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars from your company, and you look at the terminations part of it, I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, because sometimes if you do the wrong thing, you could end up in trouble yourself as an employer, right? Like, you want to be able to do it right so that you're protected, but you have to get rid of the person.
I think you have to have proof.
Yeah,
you can't just guess.
Yeah,
it's really a proof issue. You can if you catch someone stealing, there's no law that will prevent you from firing that person. Now, maybe it could be more complicated because maybe there's a history between the employer and that employee. And those facts may not look good for the employer in a follow-on wrongful discharge case or some type of discrimination case. So you have to take that into consideration. But certainly if they're stealing, especially a fairly large amount, you really just have to get rid of them. I mean, I don't think you have a choice. Do you want that person hanging around because you're afraid that you might get a lawsuit? Probably not. Now, never say never. There's probably a circumstance when I might say, wow, you really got to think about that. Maybe you ought to do take a different tact on this one. But, I really don't get involved in theft too often. I do get calls every once in a while, and, they talk to me about it, and I say, well, here's what I think you should do on the termination side. But that's normally as far as it goes, and I've never said, hey, I don't think you should terminate him. I've always said, I think you should terminate him, and here's how I think you should do it.
Oh, okay. I think, that some employees, especially ones that have been employed by the same company for a long time, a lot of them get an attitude or they feel entitled to taking things because certain things have happened between them and the boss. Maybe they worked overtime for half an hour and never got paid,
or maybe they had a little love affair that broke off, and then it's revenge.
That's a bad one. But
yeah.
But I mean, there's like attitudes that develop, and even though the employee shows up for work on time and apparently does their job, they start to feel entitled to take things like they're owed what they're taking.
Yeah.
And then when they don't get caught, the things become bigger and more often that they take.
Yeah. On part of my article deals with not working while you're on the clock. Yeah. And that's a type of theft. I've never seen that prosecuted. I've never heard of it being prosecuted, meaning it becomes a criminal charge. But I've seen situations like that, and the employer's not really watching the clock very carefully and is letting other people they trust kind of run it. They're not doing a very good job. They're not watching it very closely. And then all of a sudden, this person all of a sudden has built up extreme overtime and, things like that. And they know that the person hadn't worked that much. But what do you do when you got a record that says that they had? So you're right. It's one of those things where, for whatever reason, someone feels like, hey, they owe me something. I'm going to go get it back. And then when it gets easy, they do it more and more. Yes, that's not an unusual pattern.
I want to talk about the money of bookkeepers and fake accounts and all of this, because we know someone, and Nancy's experienced this. It's really quite interesting, and I hope you're listening now. You know who you are.
Okay.
Okay. I know, right? So you were talking about how an employee can actually, if they're like, especially if in a managerial position, can create fake accounts, like vendor accounts, and then take money to pay the vendor. Like, that's crazy. That's like.
It's possible.
But I would say this, if it's cash, like if it's a cash kind of thing, just like, here, taking petty cash into this vendor, and it's really, going into their pocket. Wow.
Yeah, I think cash is a little easier to do it with, but it's not impossible to do it without cash credit. I mean, if you're paying a fake vendor into a fake vendor account that you have created, right? And so that's one reason why I say, hey, you really got to spot check, and you also on books. It's a good idea to have an outside third party, an accountant or whatever, an accounting firm, come in and take a look at your books every once in a while to make sure things are kosher. If you don't, you run the risk of this kind of thing happening.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And I went and got an accountant and a lawyer to look at the books because I knew something was really, really wrong, but I couldn't find it. I just couldn't find it. And, quite frankly, I was so busy, I didn't look as often as I should. And I learned that.
Right. Well, yep. No, the press of business keeps us busy. And we want to trust people to do their jobs. Yeah. And you really actually rely on them because you've got so many other things you're trying to do. So, that's, that's not the fault of the employer. I mean, being busy isn't the fault of the employer, but you got to think about the risks that evolve because you're so busy and you can't pay attention to everything. You just can't. Yeah. So you need to bring in other people to help you out.
Yeah, because you were talking about the bookkeepers can stash money in hidden accounts and then go and get the deposits. Yeah. That's exactly because, Nancy and I have talked about this for years. Like, this was significant chunks of change, and it was consistent. So it was building, how people, when you get robbed, sometimes it's going to be an inside deal. We know about that just through life. We've been robbed a number of times, and people will start to move things around, and if you don't notice, then it'll just walk out of the house. Yeah. So that's happened, and so that's the same kind of thing. And I had friends that I didn't realize were thieves that would come over and play music or whatever. Next thing you know, that music just walked right out of the house with them. I was like, I just, it's just shocking when people steal. And some people really have they're kleptomaniacs and they're into it, but
it's a culture thing in some places.
But what I was going to say about this, she just kept doing this. And so Nancy had independent people come in, and because it was this steady thing that she was doing, and she was like, well, how could she have this whole other account? We don't have this account. And it just didn't dawn on us for a long time. And reading your articles, like, duh, she just sets one up. That was so funny, right? When we were reading Ward's article, we're like, that was amazing. Because it was, and if you're close to the employee, it's painful. It's mean. It's kind of.
Oh yeah, no, that's devastating. You trust someone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and they can be friends too. And you trust someone, and they betray that trust. And not only does it hurt your bottom line, but probably the bigger pain is it hurts your trust that you've built up. Yeah. So.
Well, I just couldn't even believe it. Yeah. And they kept telling me, they're like, look, it's right here in the books. This is how it works. This is what she's doing. And I just like, no, she would never do that. And they're looking at me, oh yeah, she did it. Look. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have proof.
Yeah. Then you just it's like, oh man, I don't know what to do about it. And they're looking at me, you fire her.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You really have to.
Yeah. They wanted me to prosecute her, and I couldn't even make myself do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's crazy.
Well, on something big like that, they do. Then the district attorney will get interested in it. If it's a smaller thing, it's a lot harder to get them involved in business theft, merchandise theft. They have all sorts of crimes they're prosecuting. But if it's big enough, they do get interested.
But it was big enough. It was big enough, but this is in an African country, and I had a real hard time.
And right after that, we had to leave anyway.
Causing somebody to go to jail in that particular country.
Yeah, especially when it's a woman.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
couldn't
crazy.
Make myself do it.
But wow.
But now I wish I had.
Yeah. Yep. So now I want to go to the part about screening applicants, because we've talked about this before on the shows too, and I think that screening is important. We've talked about it when you were talking about security before. that it's important. And that's what I always think about. My uncle, when he got murdered, if he his employee did it, and if he'd known all these issues with this guy, that he might still be alive, and so would the his friend and other employee there. These background checks are important, criminal wise. And sometimes you find out, hey, maybe they robbed a bank or they robbed somebody else. And, you talk about really, checking their references, because sometimes the references are bogus too, who they put on there,
Oh yeah.
People don't even call.
Right. In restaurants, the turnover is pretty high. So I feel for someone who has that type of workforce when they don't really want to call everyone. I get it. It takes a lot of time. But if you want to be safest, if you want to be less likely to have things stolen, then you really ought to. And then if it's a bogus reference, just go, hey, they didn't show up, I'm not hiring you, or they weren't there, I'm not hiring you, they don't exist. So it's definitely a good thing to do for any business. Certainly businesses that don't have the huge turnover, take the time. Take the time.
I remember there was some kind of law being passed in Arizona, and being at a tourism meeting, a hotel association meeting or something, and two lawyers, I don't know, security people came in saying you need to do these checks, and that they were trying to make it an absolute law. And then half the room got mad, and the other half of the room were like, yeah, you really should have these checks, they were security. They did the checks or whatever, the checking of the company that did it. And, we were looking at, okay, so a hotel, like if you're, in a hotel, and, I remember talking to you about this, Ward. Yeah, there was somebody got raped by the maintenance guy in a hotel because he had the key to all the rooms. And this woman got raped, a guest got raped. And this guy, they never did a background check, and so they were trying to do some kind of legislation that this is important for hotels to do.
Yeah.
And when you think about the tourism industry, it's interesting. Now, our hotelier friends say that they actually count how many times, and your key actually registers when it has been used on the door, so they can track who did what in opening a hotel room door, which I didn't know.
But
interesting, yeah.
That is what we listened to. That was their defense in not getting background checks, because if something happened, they could go on the record of the key and see, who went in and out the room. But from my point of view, as a guest in a hotel, I don't want to be an after the fact statistic. I want somebody, I want something that, I don't want you to hire someone who's going to rape somebody.
Right.
Just because you can tell afterwards who did what doesn't help the person who got raped.
Yeah, or beaten or robbed, And
it doesn't help the hotel's reputation either.
Well, that could open up liability to the hotel as well, because if there's a glaring error on the background of someone, then maybe they're responsible for actually not checking and protecting their patrons as well as they should. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've never filed a case like that. I don't deal in that kind of law really, but I would feel pretty confident that there have been some cases like that filed.
Yeah, it's interesting because, also a lot of the times the crime is really like, people worry about their things in a hotel room. Well, where they're going to get stolen is if you leave them in the car. I mean, that's just like a normal thing. When you, having been on the road for many years, never leave anything in the car of value ever anywhere. Take it in.
Yeah.
Take it in.
Even just a simple sweater is enough to get, your car broken in.
And you can get these little locks that you put on your door. It's a little security thing. It just hooks on the door handle, and if someone tries to open the door, an alarm will go off.
Those are cool.
They're cool. Yep.
They're way cool.
Yes, you can travel with those. So that's just a tip out there for people, and it's cool because it will wake everybody up.
Yeah, it does.
It's cool,
especially when it goes off when you didn't intend it to.
But I want to go back to this about the criminal background checks, because you talk about the ban the box rule, and is that something that goes in different states, or is this ban the box rule? Is this just California? And can you explain what that is?
No, there are many states that have banned the box rules now. I'm not sure how many, but it's a trend that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years. California adopted one. I think it was just last year. Maybe it just went into effect this year in 2018. I'm pretty sure that's right. If not this year, it was last year, but very recent. And what it says is you cannot do a background check on an applicant until you've offered them a position of employment. Then you can do it, and then there's a whole process by, well, if you find something, how do you handle it? Well, you're supposed to tell them, and then you're supposed to, and now they're employed, right? Mm-hmm. So you tell them, hey, I found this in your background as a problem, and then they get a chance to rebut, and then the employer makes the final decision based on the rebuttal. So you're not allowed to do that criminal background check until there has been an offer of employment. The idea behind that is that people who do have a criminal record have a terrible time getting jobs. So the legislature thought, hey, we need these people employed, so we're going to make it a little easier for them to be employed, and the employer is going to have to prove that this criminal background is something that they really should be concerned about and can't hire them for. So that's the policy.
I thought anybody could do a background check on anybody. Like even before you date someone, you might want to do a background check.
Well, yeah, you can still do it, but it's for an employer to do it pre-hiring. It's not legal.
Don't you need people's social security number to do it? I think you need.
Well, certainly that's something that people who do that type of work would want. But before, the background check was regularly completed before the employment.
Okay. So the other thing you talk about is you give a list of things to help prevent the workplace theft, and it's true. The more you do in prevention, you're saying loud and clear, I'm watching, I'm aware, and you ain't going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like putting up your security signs and all of that good stuff. And you say to set up cameras in key areas. So especially in the hospitality world, you're basically in the public. So employees shouldn't get upset about that, right?
Right. Most places in the work, there was a California case that came out, 3 or 4 years ago, and it talked about an employer has the right to have security cameras up. In most places in the employment area, you just have to make sure it's not one of those places where someone really does expect privacy. The bathroom is a clear one, the locker room is another one. I'm sure there are others that I haven't thought about or heard about, but mostly it's open to the public. Mostly it's an area where more than one person goes. You're not really, you don't have privacy like a warehouse. Do you really have privacy expectations? No, not really. The employer can come in, the employer can send anyone in they want to check on anything. So you really don't have an expectation of privacy. I guess it's a little different. For instance, if you have a lunchbox and you have it under lock, then you do have you've created an expectation of privacy and something like that, maybe a briefcase, things like that. But the general work area, no, most of that's open to, if not the public, at least access to many people who are employed there. So there's not a great expectation of privacy.
And it's a good thing just in general for security. It's not just the employees. It's about security as a whole. Just so long as you're not like
right.
Chuck Berry, man. Chuck Berry, he had little cameras and peepholes in his restaurant bathrooms. He watched women.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Or if I did, I don't remember it.
He's a pioneer of rock and roll guitar, but he was a Mr. Peeper, as we call him. But anyway, none of that should happen, in bathrooms. Okay, so now, because it's interesting, like Vegas has got to be one of the most, camera-fied cities ever. I would love to go up in, the casino rooms and watch. through their cameras. Wouldn't that be cool to like see what's going on?
If you could see the poker hand, that'd be cool.
I mean, but just to watch, but they have to watch. I mean, it's that goes down.
The dealers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, that's a perfect example of that's open to the public. So there's no expectation of privacy there. So yeah, they can do that. There's just not a problem with that.
Yeah. Wow. So
I think they have to. They've learned. You know,
this is amazing.
There's too much cash. Nowadays, you hardly ever see anybody paying with cash anymore.
Yeah. You don't see that very much. And so that's good tracking, though, And so, like banks and stuff, if you're a teller, and that you have to have good security on that. You can't just you walk out of the bank with money in your hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see all the cameras in banks too. I mean, there's cameras all over the walls. There's, inside, outside. Yeah, they have many cameras positioned in key places.
I wanted to say, last month you were on talking about San Diego law, like for employers and employees, and everyone. That article's up on blendradioandtv.com. So if you're moving there or already there, it's a good article to read, whether you're the employer or the employee. And you talk about the value of handbooks. Don't you think like these kind of things should go in the handbook? Like, if you see, your colleague, doing something like maybe not working or playing Facebook all day or how many people do you walk into an office and you see someone just sitting there playing solitaire? I want to take it away from them. Drives me nuts. But anyway, it's like, stop it. But, ratting out your fellow colleague or, that you put in like, hey, do not steal, we're watching you, that kind of thing. Would you put that in the handbook?
Well, I like your idea of putting in the handbook something that gives employees whistleblower incentive to tell management about people who are mostly, actually stealing, taking something physical or cash or something like that. But there's no reason why you couldn't expand it to, well, if you see someone, now it gets a little dicey here though. If you see someone, goofing off, wasting time, not doing work when they're at work, then you could put that in writing too. Now, there's a problem in enforcement, one, because, no one works. If you go to work for 8 or 9 hours a day, you're not working the whole time. I mean, come on, no one does. So, how far are you really going to carry that? And will that actually undermine the morale of the office by pushing it too far? People who have vendettas against other employees may use that as an excuse to go after someone that they don't like or have some type of relationship that they're a competition situation where they're competing with them and they want them out of the way. So I think you got to be careful about how you approach that, time wasting. I think of that as more of a managerial thing, but you could put it in the handbook maybe under two different categories. One where we encourage people to come forward with theft issues. We do not tolerate that here, and we want to make sure everyone's on the same, is abiding by the same rules. But then separately, you might say something like, when you come to work, you're here to work, and your personal devices need to be left somewhere or put under the desk, or however you want to say it, and you can't use company machines and computers to do personal things like play games or whatever else. So I think that's a good thing to act. I mean, if you're sensitive to that, that's a good thing to put in to your handbook. But I think you want to keep them separate, because one's really encouraging people to spot theft. The other is, trying to manage your workforce better.
Okay. Yeah. And well, sometimes people are just sitting there and there's nothing for them to do. Like if they have to sit at the reception area, and you have to stay there, and no one calls and no one comes in, what are you supposed to do? Honestly.
Well, and certainly some people are really there just in case. A receptionist, you need a good receptionist, but they're not going to be engaged in being doing greeting people all the time. But you might have them do some typing or whatever else. If they're still not engaged for the full 8 hours, assuming they work 8 hours a day, then maybe you just live with that because you just need someone up there.
So yeah, I think sometimes they're like, oh, you could dust over here or read this manual over there, and then you just kind of putter around and la-di-da.
Okay, it was, but I think it's interesting. I do want to touch on employers stealing from employees. What about, theft of wages and things like that? We've talked about this before where, maybe not giving the tips to, the servers or to the bartenders or, things like that happening. And then what happens if someone doesn't pay their wages on time?
Yeah. Now, in the article, I said, well, that's really wage theft. It isn't really considered workplace theft. It's not quite the same thing, but the legislature in California, and I'm sure in other states, has taken that pretty seriously, and that term has been used pretty frequently in the last few years. And what they're really describing is just not paying according to the law. And when you talk about tips and tip pooling, there's pretty strict rules about how tips can be shared, and the house cannot share in them. At least in California, they certainly cannot share in them. So if the house is keeping some of the tip, that's the kind of thing that would be labeled as wage theft and not really workplace theft. But it's still, again, something that the legislature is taking very seriously, has passed more laws about that kind of thing, and is working hard to prevent employers from not paying according to the law.
Mm.
There's instances we know of a restaurant owner who keeps everybody's tips till the end of the year.
Mm.
And if you're still employed and you haven't quit, then he'll divide up the tips equally among the servers. And if you'd quit, then you just don't get your tips.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
In California, that definitely doesn't fly.
It is in California.
It is in California.
Well, it wasn't legal. The server's entitled to the tip that they earn. They're waiting on the table, and if they're doing a great job, then you're thinking that they've earned that tip because they're doing such a good job. The house can say, well, we want you to share your tip with other frontline employees like bussers, and they can collect it and distribute it with those frontline employees that are in the chain. But they can't say, well, I'm going to take your tip from your table and give it to another server.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So things are getting tighter and tighter and tighter on this, man. Yeah. Wow. Ward, good information as always. Good information. So everybody stop stealing from each other. That's all I want to say about that. No more thievery allowed. But is that where you get called mostly, is if the employer is not doing their job when it comes to thievery? Is it more on the employer not doing the payment part?
Yeah, by far. When in this big umbrella of what we've labeled as theft, I gotta say, is not paying minimum wage theft? I don't know if it's theft, but it certainly violates the law. I don't think you can get prosecuted for it under a criminal sanction. Now, actually, I'd take that back. There are some special statutes in the labor code that do have criminal sanctions associated with them for things like this. But it's not as it's very specific, and it's not like just general. You didn't pay me right, so now you're going to go to jail. It's not that kind of thing. But yeah, by far the most calls I get in this type of situation would be an employee feeling they're underpaid, not paid overtime, working off the clock, that kind of thing. I get those calls way more often than I do from an employer who says someone stole something from me. I do get those calls, but it's much rarer.
Interesting, Ward. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've got good music for you now.
Oh, good.
We talked about the trust issues, right? of theft. Well, this song is called "Never Trust the Living."
Okay.
Well, it's actually a whole album, but it's a signature track from the Johnny Mastro and the Mama's Boys, and this is their latest album, "Never Trust the Living," the signature track from it. You can go to johnnymastro.com for more on that. But everyone, keep up with Ward. Go to bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. Especially if you're in San Diego, and give them a call, 1-800-WARD, right? No, but seriously, you do, when there's a situation, sit down with people and do like a complimentary consultation or just conversation beforehand to see if it's a good fit, or kind of guide them on where they need to be when there's a situation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that in the form of a question?
Yes.
I apologize.
Yeah, I know. So when you meet with people, the initial consultation is complimentary, right? It's free. So that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, free initial consultation. Sure. That's what I do. That's my practice.
All righty, very nice. Everyone, bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. His article on workplace theft is in Parks and Travel magazine, the August-September issue, and you can just go to nationalparktraveling.com and just type in Ward, and you'll also get other tourism and hospitality employment law articles there. He's also up in blendradioandtv.com. Don't forget, listeners, Big Blend Radio airs Sunday through Friday. Just go to bigblendradio.com for the schedule, and you can listen as shows air, or you can listen anytime on demand. And we're on Spotify now, too. Yay. I know.
Oh, cool.
I know, right? I'm like, hey, that happened yesterday. And I was like, dude, that's super cool. So everyone, Spotify, you have to type the name of the show. So if it's Ward's on there, just type in Success Express and type Ward in Spotify and you'll find him. It's very cool.
Wow. I'll have to do that.
I know. It's exciting. So everyone, here it is. Never Trust the Living. Thank you as always, listeners, for joining us. And thank you, Ward.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You take care.
Okay. Bye.
I want for golden eagles, fly me to a bomb, break away these chains, shackled to my love. Today, I can't believe I stayed so long, treating me this way. Trust the living, she used to say. Never trust the living, she used to say. Help me, mama, I think I'm dying. Go to sleep drunk and wake up crying. Never trust the living, she used to say. Sleep drunk, wake up crying. Trust the living, she used to say.